Good morning and welcome to Everyday Life. Mabel is not able to host the show today. She is out running errands, but I am here filling in for her. But also I am super glad to be filling in for her on Saturday when I have with me Mr. Richard M. Kavuma. You are the greatest of the greats in journalism in Uganda. Nobody can mention journalism in Uganda without mentioning your name.
You're very kind.
But you're also very kind. Richard M. Kavuma has spent 20 years in the field, or over 20 years in journalism. You have written for the Daily Monitor, edited for the Observer, written for the Guardian. You've even written blogs for the BBC. You've written award-winning projects. Tell us, what's your motivation for joining journalism?
My motivation for joining journalism was basically to inform. When I joined St. Mary's College in 1991, my uncle had bought me a award receiver radio as a gift for scoring aggregate 4 at PLE.
Jesus, you even were the best at primary level.
I was in a master. So what happened was I was one of the few students at St. Mary's who had a radio. And so I used to listen to news, to the BBC, to Radio Uganda, whatever. And I noticed that there were so many students who had this information gap, and they always came to me to ask me, so did Tyson win? So did Villa win? So what happened here? And I realized that during preps I couldn't concentrate because everyone was consulting me. So there was a small blackboard at the back of the class, and I told myself, what if I just wrote the main news of the day on the board? Then people can just come and look at the board and read and go out without disturbing my preps. And so that started in senior 1, and I did it, I think, through senior 4. And when I was in senior 5, I thought I wanted to be a doctor. But somehow the idea of cutting cockroaches and rats didn't quite appeal. And so I had a conversation with my headmaster and told him I don't think I want to do physics, chemistry, biology. And said, so what do you want to do? And so we agreed that I would think about it, and then a couple of hours later I went back to him and told him, but you see, I'm already a journalist, so I think I want to be a journalist. And so I switched to the arts courses, combinations, and the rest is history. When I was in senior 5, I walked over to Daily Monitor and told them I want to write. And I was wearing my school uniform, and there was a guy called Robert Mugaga who is hunted nanos, and so they laughed at me and said, oh, Scooby, you want to write? That's quite ambitious. And they took me to the late Richard Tebere, who unfortunately died. And he had also gone to St. Mary's, so he was thrilled. And he said, oh, my hobby, that's very good. And so you go and write. And then a week later, my first story was published. And
what story was this?
It was a story about a football game at St. Mary's College, Sobi. And so when I realized that the intro of my first story hadn't been edited, I told myself, I think I can make it. And so I've been telling stories
since then. Tell us about graduating from just doing the day field reporting to editing a paper.
Yeah, it's one time when I was at Monitor then, I realized that the then chief sub-editor, Kevin Aliro, was spending a lot of time.
Who is another industry great also.
Yeah, unfortunately he's not with us, but I realized that he was doing a lot of last-minute work, calling up people, cross-checking details, and I kind of felt pity for him because he really looked stressed and stretched. And so one evening I went to him and told him, can I help you with some of your work? And I can call up people for you to cross-check a few things. And he said, oh, that would be a great help. And so from then on, every time he needed someone to help with something, he would ask me. And so some, good many years after he had left us, I was asked to become the editor at the Observer, which is something I did until the last day of March.
Which is, you left at such a sad time, the break-ins at the Observer.
Yeah, it's like you've been preparing for this journey. You're probably traveling out of the country, and then as you're stepping out, a prominent family member is pronounced dead. And so I went in to empty my drawers, and then found the gate open, and actually had the displeasure of breaking the news to my colleagues that we had been robbed again. But you know, I stayed around and helped to put together the issue of the following Monday. But yeah, so it was just a bad coincidence. But the last words that I wrote, because I did edit the story that reported about the break-ins, but the last words that I wrote for the Observer were defiant faces of courage and resilience. And that, I think, is how I would like to look at the Observer. You know, faces of courage, resilience, and I think they're doing a great job, and I'm sure they will do well.
One of your colleagues, Daniel Kalinaki, describes you as one of the greatest icons of journalism for Uganda, and also says journalism has lost a man and a goal. And that's where my next question is anchored. Why would you leave?
I think the problem is partly mine. I am the kind of person who my only satisfaction is in giving 120, 150%. And when you're doing that at a place like the Observer, you can't do it for so many years. So I could have given 70, 80 and stayed a little longer, but my only joy comes from doing my best. And I always felt, okay, I think I've done my best, and if I can't give my best any longer, then it's not worth doing. So I think I wouldn't have wanted to leave, but I left with my head high, knowing that as long as I did it, I gave it my best. Dying for every little detail to be correct, caring that every reader should be satisfied, which is almost an impossible job. But our only consolation then in whatever we do is in doing our best, because if every one of us does our best, I think this world would be a much better place.
I know when you were describing editing, I don't know if there was you, another editor, in your book, you described the job as thankless. that perhaps explains why, I mean, you take a huge toll as an editor.
Yeah, I think someone said when doctors make a mistake on us, you know, their mistakes are buried 6 feet
underground.
But when we journalists make mistakes, we hang our mistakes up for everyone to see. So you basically are telling people, look how daft we are. And so that means if it falls on you to take responsibility for everything in the newspaper or on the program, it takes a huge toll on you. Just a comment in the wrong place will spoil your day. And it's almost a very lonesome place. Because not many people, not the reader, not your colleagues, will understand what happens inside of you. So it's thankless. It's like, you know, being one, you never see the editor's byline. Even when they write their editorial, it's not captioned. And I was telling my friend Flora Aduku at Monitor that being an editor is like being a defender in a team. You know, you have Cristiano Ronaldo taking all the credits for striking in the goals, but there are defenders and defensive midfielders who are working very hard to keep out goals at the other end. They rarely win the Ballon d'Or.
Then, of course, making sure every comma goes where it's supposed to go is where you write your book as you bow out of journalism. Right, comma, tight.
Yeah.
There was a comma there. I was captured by the introduction to the book where you say this journalist was visiting a friend and found the editor had already edited, and the editor stepped out for coffee, and then he's like, oh, this is a great journalist you're editing right here, without knowing the amount of work that had gone into that. What would inspire you to write a book?
The idea started around 2013. At the end of my first year as editor, I realized that I was still correcting the same problems that I started with on day one. And it then crossed my mind that maybe I'm not doing a good job sharing this kind of feedback. I was trying my best to give people feedback, to talk to people and see this how we can improve. But then I realized that the mistakes kept coming back, I kept correcting them. And so I thought, what if I just put them down so that people can read and maybe they can improve their work, and then if every one of us improves, then the newspaper gets better and the readers are happier and everyone will be happier. So the idea stayed with me. I discussed it with our leader, Dr. Peter Mesege, and we kept talking about it. So we need to write something down. And then last year, as I realized that I was on my last legs in the newsroom, I decided to inject a sense of urgency in it, and I just said, I think I can't live without leaving something back. Because as editor, I used to create my own time to offer support, mentorship to especially young people who are getting into the newsroom. I remember one time sending an email on a Sunday at 9 p.m. to one of the rookies I had just met for the first time. And then he replied and said, receiving an email from you at 9 p.m. on a Sunday just shows me how devoted you are to what you're doing, and I'm profoundly humbled. And I thought the message touched me. I hadn't even realized that it was that late. But I thought, okay, if someone appreciates that, then maybe it's worth doing. So the book was then something that I would leave back, so that the young people who are coming into journalism can probably read it, and hopefully it can help them improve their work, and we should all be better off.
I noticed in the book you devoted a significant amount of time to discuss how to plan a story, how to write and tell a story, and how to get spellings right. You actually have a glossary in the middle of the book there. Why the choice of the subjects you chose to write about? Why them?
I think it goes back to the original motivation, the original idea was that you have these common problems that keep cropping up, and then if we can share them and kind of flag them up, then we can become more sensitive. If I wrote Raymond the wrong way, and someone points it out to me that no, Raymond is supposed to be like this, next time I'm writing Raymond, it should flash at the back of my mind, and then I can be able to say, oh, have I gotten Raymond right? And so that's why I spent a bit of time on that. The bit of planning is, again, from experience, and also because when I was writing the book, first it came up as a collection of my own feelings about our business. But then I did a bit of reading, and I found that the convictions that I had developed over the years were actually standardized in other places. I mean, for instance, I used to track changes. If I wanted to give someone specific support, I would track changes in a story and give them the tracked copy. And then years later, after when I was writing the book, I did read a book by Jack Hart called A Writer's Coach. And then it turned out that when he was learning to be a journalist, there was an editor at one of the newspapers in America who used to give these tracked changes. And that's so many years ago, and I'm like, okay, maybe it works. So the book is a collection of both my experiences, but also some of the best practices in the world.
The book comes at a time when, journalism is being challenged, both by new and emerging media, but also by internal challenges, getting things right. These days, it's commonplace to find a mistake on even the front page of the paper. In broadcast, we also have mistakes every day, spelling people's names. And in a way, the industry has this much challenge around it to get things right. As someone that has lived through the industry and is now on the other end of it, what do you think is the problem? Where do you see the problem?
I think part of the challenge goes back to the quality of the learning, because sometimes when I've tried to...
That's funny, if I could just interrupt, because in the book you note that some of the journalists today are even striving for a second degree, and yet here they are with common mistakes.
Yeah, so the thing is, the quality of the learning. Sometimes when I'm trying to jolt some of my, mentees to kind of take things a bit more seriously, I tell them, come on, look, these are things we learned in P6, P5, P7, punctuation, grammar. And some of those things, you know, I still feel for my teachers in primary school and feel like, oh, they probably did a good job. Some of that has to do with that. But I think another challenge, you also have to look at the level of mentorship and training in the newsrooms. I think we could do, you know, editors could do a bit more. A great many of us are happier to fix the copy, but not fix the person who produces the copy. I was lucky that, you know, when I came into journalism, there were lots of people who would show you what to do, who would back at you, who would frown at you. The late Kevin Alero used to tell us that when they were little rookies and, you know, you write your story, they used to write on paper and you submit it to an editor, and then you would say, someone would get your copy and just fold it and throw it in your face and say, what is this trash? Now, obviously, we can't be that tyrannical, but it just goes to show that what the other guy was trying was to get the young man to pay attention to detail, and then you know what we got out of that. So I think the newsrooms could do a better job training, but it also goes back to logistical challenges, because if an editor is already having, you know, too much work, because maybe he's filling in for one or two other people, then they might not have enough time. I told you I used to basically create my own time. Every time I sat with a younger colleague trying to, you know, give them some support, at the back of my mind I was saying to myself, look, you have a deadline to beat. Look, do you have to do this? But, you know, I just did it anyway. So without the necessary infrastructure, human resources, it becomes really difficult. So the challenges are many, but I think, I hope that, you know, the younger people who are coming into journalism will look up to people like Raymond and say, okay,
Richard.
I want to be like Raymond, and then they will go out and do a better job. I remember my first stories that I wrote were inspired by the BBC, because I used to listen to the BBC and I wanted to be an international journalist. So I think people like you should be able to inspire many people out there.
You wanted to be an international journalist. You ended up becoming an international journalist, writing for The Guardian, even on an award-winning project. How was that? When we journalists, when we do our work, we do not really work for awards. And sometimes you don't want to get so carried away. Because awards bring a lot of fame, you know, they bring a lot of attention. I think I wasn't interviewed on TV until I won the award. So, but you always want to make sure that you do not cut the branch on which you're sitting. Because what gets you any kind of recognition is doing good work. So for me, the awards were a kind of distraction, a kind of inconvenience. But looking back now, I can say, okay, maybe I wasn't just lucky. Because my initial instinct was, oh, probably the judges were tired and said, oh, let's just give to this block. So, but that was also an inbuilt mechanism to avoid getting carried away. I remember one of the decisions I made was to not to leave the Observer. Because once the big awards started coming and many people would say, okay, we want to work with you. And then I said, no, I will not leave. Because maybe people who are interested in me are probably carried away by the award. So I'll stay here, plow it all back, and when all the fame is gone, maybe I can leave. So I think I'm glad I plowed everything back. And I think for me the book was kind of a way of signing off. Journalism gave me too much. Now I give everything back to journalism in that book. Well, of course, this is not the last book you're writing. We expect an autobiography from you.
Who would be interested in an autobiography of an ordinary blog?
I am interested, and I can pay up front for it. You mentioned a very interesting subject, getting carried away, the fame of it. And with social media available now, journalists get carried away much easily. I mean, you do a good story, and then tomorrow morning your social media is awash with all this praise and hope. How do you move on from that praise? How do you stay fixed on the prize?
Yeah, I think social media has a very interesting dynamic. Someone called it the mass dynamic. So it's a mutual admiration society. So everyone likes the other and holds the other up. I think it's a good thing. It's a way of broadening the platform for debate, the public, discourse. So from that sense, it has really demystified publishing. Because previously, publishing is power.
Yeah.
Because the editor you sit here and you decide who you're going to have on this show. So you have a lot of power. Social media faces everyone, but also brings so many voices that maybe would not have been heard to the fore. So it has a very, very useful dynamic. I think so many things in life are not necessarily bad. What is bad is how we use them. Or that's what may be bad or good. So I think the way to approach social media is to take the value from it, but always to keep the goals on the prize, because I think the prize for us should be doing better work. If we can do better work, the praise will come, but as long as we keep our eyes on the goal, you can be sure that the viewers, the readers, the consumers of our products will be satisfied. And then maybe there will be other praise from other people, and then maybe we can look back and say, okay, maybe that was deserved. If you look at the recent Uganda National Journalism Awards, which are organized by the African Center for Media Excellence, I think quality doesn't lie. You can look at some of the people who are recognized there, Ben Onaluka, then you have other guys, Stephen Senkava. You see people who have a track record of devotion to quality, and so somehow the quality doesn't lie. And if we keep our eyes on the prize, then the real prize will eventually come.
Parting shot, this book, where can it be found? How can someone put their hands around it?
The African Center for Media Excellence, as you know, is the publishers. So the book wasn't a commercial venture.
Yeah.
I could have written it and put it in a bookshop, but I always think you're then going to ask yourself, will I get the money out? So the idea is to put money out of the equation, do it for the cause, and then ensure that people can get it. So ACME will be distributing that book. It was sponsored generously by the Open Society Initiative for Eastern Africa. So as long as the money is there, they will print the copies. And then those copies will be given out for free. I'm sure Peter and the other Bernard and everyone will be telling us soon how the book will be accessed. And then we can sort of go from there.
Of course, I was lucky to get a copy of it from the African Center for Media Excellence. They awarded all of us that had gone for the awards with a copy. People are wondering, those of us that were looking up to you, where have you gone?
Yes, I've joined the International Organization for Migration, which is the United Nations lead agents working for humane and orderly migration, which is of course becoming an ever more important, So migration is, and of course with all these immigrants crisis in Europe, so it's becoming an ever important affair. So IOM is trying to push to work for humane and orderly migration. So I'm now there as the public information officer. The goal is the same, to tell the stories. So I hope I can be able to share some stories with the public about what it means, to be a migrant, and what it means for, to be trying to do something to help migrants live a better life, retain their human dignity.
All right, thank you so much. That was Richard M. Kavuma, who is formerly the editor of The Observer, now moved on to Public Information Officer at IOM. He is the greatest of the great in journalism. he likes to deny it, but he is the greatest of the great in journalism. And, well, he has left a legacy, the book Right, Tight. Yeah, that book is being distributed by the African Center for Media Excellence, and we will have them here at some point to discuss with us how people can get themselves copies. If you're a journalist out there looking to make it in the field, this is a book you look forward to, and Richard Kavuma's guidance is guidance you look forward to. Thank you so much for having us in the morning.